Bam! What's up, everybody? New episode of the Early Retirement Vlog. My name is Ray Taylor. From time to time, I like to talk about things that apply to me, and this is where I do it. So I'm going to talk about in this episode my love of stand-up comedy, or comedy, performance comedy, stand-up comedy. I mean, it started with more of like the Who's Line and the SNLs of the world. Like sketch comedy was kind of my first real understanding of like, oh, this is different than like movies or whatever. Um, Whereas like stand up, I guess I did see stand up comedy like Comedy Central had a bunch of comedy specials like so. Comedy Central was huge. I remember when I got it, I didn't have cable for a lot of my life, and then there was a chunk of my life through high school to about 26 or the age 25 where I got rid of cable. And Comedy Central was huge, man. Seeing comedy specials, seeing um, Saturday Night Live. When I was a kid growing up, my friend's stepdad worked at the sound booth for the McCallum Theater in Palm Springs, which is a giant theater where they put on plays and performances. I don't know how many seats, or like 3,000 maybe 2,000 if I had to guess. I haven't been there in a while, so I don't know exactly how many seats it would be, but pretty big theater. But it's mostly plays. I did see some stand up. Like I remember, I don't really, I don't. I remember going to see it. I saw Carrot Top do a performance there. I saw God, what's his name? Uh, the the Russia guy. The in Russia, toilet shits you. Fuck, what's his name? It's like right there. I was there anyway. I saw him perform, and I think I may have seen like Bill Maher or something perform there. But I was like, I was a kid. It wasn't like I enjoyed them. I enjoyed it, but it was like I don't know. Going to a theater, a hoity-toity theater as a kid, watching these stand-up comics do their shows. I didn't appreciate it at the time because I wasn't necessarily into stand-up specifically like I am now. Like now, it'd be awesome to go. Well, I mean, I do go. I went and saw, probably the last theater show I saw with a stand-up comic was Rogan, Joe Rogan and Ian Edwards here in Denver. But usually I go to club shows for comedy, like in San Diego, the American Comedy Club, the Comedy Store in La Jolla, Madhouse Comedy, or in LA, the Comedy Store. I've been to there. Um, Denver, I've been to the Comedy Works, and then I went and saw the Dollop at the Oriental Theater. So I enjoy going to see live stand-up comedy, but as a kid, I wasn't into it. I was more into like SNL. I loved SNL at the time. Um, Fucking Whose Line Is It Anyway? Loved that. Like the improv kind of comedy, I loved that as a kid. I wasn't really as much into the stand-up, although I did enjoy the stand-up specials, but I can't really remember any one that stood out where I was like, oh, that's like I didn't really follow any comics then. Um, so as a kid, I didn't really, and then I got TV and SNL and all that kind of stuff. And then it wasn't until I would say, well, I started getting into probably around when I got rid of cable, and I started collecting DVDs a little bit heavier. Um, I got the Dave Chappelle Killing Them Softly is a great fucking special. And then a couple of the Chris Rock specials. I think Bigger and Blacker is one of them, and then there's another one, and I'd watch those. Like those were my favorite shit. That's when I started. So those were kind of my intro into stand up. Was okay, Dave Chappelle and then Chris Rock. I remember working at Blockbuster in like 2001, 2000. I don't remember when I quit Blockbuster, but uh, one of the supervisors would bring in fuck, what's his name? Oh, this is horrible. I'm like dropping all kinds of names. He was in Bad Boys with Will Smith. God damn it. Anyway, not I can't think of his name. Doesn't matter. There was those, and then so back to Killing Them Softly, Chris Rock, and then I got into Cat Williams. Cat Williams was huge, and then I remember just downloading Dane Cook when Dane Cook was really popular. I think it was a little after he was popular. I think it was kind of between where he was popular and then where a lot of people were just like, oh, he's like a sellout kind of a thing. But I remember listening to that and like fucking loving it. Fucking loving it. Like that was the first time his, I don't remember which one it was. It's probably like '07, whichever album he came out with. It's probably the first time I listened to comedy instead of watching specials. So I love that. Was super into, that was kind of my Dane Cook, and then Chris Rock, and then Dave Chappelle and Cat Williams were kind of the core. And then later I found Joe Rogan on Netflix, which was amazing. His special from way back in the day. And then podcasts, like listening to Joe Rogan and all of the different comics, I started to become more and more obsessed with stand-up comedy. And that's when I started going to comedy shows. The first comedy show I went to on my own, well, with friends, but not like as a kid, but like as an adult, was I went to go see Ari Shaffir on 420 at the La Jolla Comedy Store. So it was 420, the year was probably 2012, maybe 2011, somewhere in there. And the lineup was, Ari headlined, the feature was, motherfucker. Tony Hinchcliffe opened, and the feature was, oh, I always forget his name. He did a show, this is horrible. This is like the most, like, I'm going to talk about stuff, but I'm not going to remember any details of any names. I'm horrible at names. So in a previous episode, I talked about 23andMe and how I've like, I have the gene for Alzheimer's. I swear that stuff is starting to kick in. It's got to be like a slow progression to where you just, first it's names. Martin Lawrence. That's the stand-up special from Blockbuster. And the fucking guy that was featuring for Ari Shaffir was... Fuck, I can't remember his name. He did a podcast for a little bit. He's a black dude, does a bunch of different impressions, which his comedy set wasn't impressions. His last bit, he did like impression of people doing impressions, which was funny. I can't remember his name, but that was the first show I went to, Ari Shaffir. That's where I bought the Ari shirt. It's like one of my favorite shirts. My girlfriend at the time actually bought it for me. But that was my first actual comedy show, La Jolla Comedy Store, which is kind of a weird spot because La Jolla is really, really expensive area. Like, it's a bunch of rich people. So it's like to have definitely not the same feeling as the Los Angeles Comedy Store. So the La Jolla Comedy Store versus the Los Angeles Comedy Store, completely different. A few years after I'd seen, so I saw Ari at the 420 show at the La Jolla Comedy Store. I seen Christina Pazsitzky at the Madhouse. I think I've seen her there twice, which I'm not a fan of that club. It's more like a restaurant, and you're getting a lot of the same kind of like I just didn't like the crowd. I mean, I'm sure that her crowds are different now that with the podcast and everything, but it was like, there's a bunch of just fucking retired dudes wearing Tommy Bahama shit, that didn't really know anything. That didn't know, it was unfamiliar with her work. But, so the La Jolla Comedy Store, and then I seen, at the American Comedy Club, I've seen A bunch of shows, a bunch of Death Squad shows. Well, not a bunch. I've seen a couple Death Squad shows, and I've seen, man, who did I see? Ari Shafir. I saw Ari again. I brought different friends to go see him. And I forget who opened for him then, but so I've seen Ari a few times. But difference between La Jolla and the LA one, I went to meet up with a bunch of podcasting friends in LA, and we went to the Comedy Store. We're all huge comedy fans, so we went to the Comedy Store. We went there a couple nights, and we got a tour from Sarah Tiana, gave us a tour throughout. And the LA, I think the La Jolla has 2 rooms, I believe. I didn't get a tour of the La Jolla one. But the LA one has 3 different rooms. It's got the original room, the main room, and the belly room. The belly room is where, like, Kill Tony and the Ding Dong Show and Roast Battle. It's where, like, a lot of smaller shows kind of go. And it's weird because it's, like, up and back and far away. It's like an afterthought, like a shitty addition to this building. But it's an awesome room. It's an awesome room, and we got to see, like, the secret peepholes, because the Comedy Store used to be Cyril's nightclub, which was a mobster place. And so you could see up in the green room, you could see where you can look into all the rooms, and you could see everybody. And if you wanted to take somebody out, like, if you're like, okay, go down there and get the dude in that orange jacket and get him out of here, or whatever. Like, let's silence him. Let's go put some cement boots on him. So it's really cool, but the vibe in that room is so dark, the belly room, because there's stories of, like, oh, they used to perform abortions there. But as far as the Comedy Store, when it was the first place that Mitzi allowed women to perform. Mitzi Shore being the owner of, and she ran the Comedy Store for many years. The mom of Pauly Shore. So it's completely different vibe, the different ones, and the because the Comedy Store in LA is located in LA, you get all the lineups that they get are fucking ridiculous. The lineups that you get, like, if you follow the Comedy Store on Instagram, they post their lineups, and it's like it's all-star lineups, and it's great. You just go in, you spend whatever the cost is, $10-$20 for a ticket, and you get to watch. You could stay from, I think they start at like 9 or 7. I don't remember what time they start. But then you could stay all through the night until like 2 in the morning. Don Barris, and then I think Stephen Brody Stevens maybe closes out sometimes. But yeah, so it's crazy experience going to the Comedy Store, especially since, you know, you hear these comics talk about it. It's like their mecca. And especially now seeing that it's got like this new life and resurgence, with Rogan coming back and Joey Diaz coming back and Ari shooting a special there, and like a bunch of different comics shooting specials there, like Louis and Gerard Carmichael. I mean, it's a completely different vibe now, I guess. From what they say, it's a completely different vibe. I love it. I've also been to the Ice House in LA. And been in the Death Squad studios. Red Band has there's a attached room to the building that he uses as a studio that he's been using for years now, which I believe was initially going to be an early All Things Comedy studio, but they didn't like the rent, so they told Red Band, and he apparently went with it. But yeah, I've been to the Ice House. The Ice House has 2 stages. I've been in both rooms. The small room is fucking great. And then the big room, I remember seeing, like, the lineups you saw back in those early Death Squad shows. It was like, it'd be like Joey Diaz, Brian Callen, Duncan Trussell, Joe Rogan, Bert Kreischer, Tom Segura, like all of the heavy hitters in there. That Bill Burr, I don't think I ever saw Bill Burr, but it was great. So I've seen a few shows at the Ice House. Spent a lot of time at the LA Comedy Store. You know, and the shows that I've seen in Denver at the Comedy Works, seen Ari, and finally got to see a full set from Duncan Trussell, which was amazing. The ride there, the ride there was probably the most crazy, weird Uber rides that Keith and I had ever been in. We talked about it on our show. But it's like we were telling the driver that we're going to the Comedy Store, and like just the conversation where like sarcasm bleeds with like sincerity, to where it got to the point where he was joking about having a gun in his glove box and that he would like, you know, shoot us if we did anything. It's a very weird situation, to the point where he reaches over to his glove box and opens it up and then closes it again. And it's like there was a moment where we're going to see Duncan Trussell do stand-up comedy. There's a moment where I'm like, oh, I could be shot right now. Some fucking asshole with a gun thinks that we're some kind of a fucking threat for some reason, because he's a fucking wacko paranoid that wants to curl his finger and end a life, because that's all you need to do to end a life when you own a gun. Just point it and then curl a finger. That's what your life is worth to those people. That's it. Your life right there. Alive, not alive. Not necessarily, not those people, but some people. And anyway, I don't want to go on a whole gun control thing. Anyway, we almost get shot on the way to the thing. The first thing Duncan does to start off his set is to do some meditation, some ohms. It was the best thing ever. And I meditate too, so I'm all for it. It's not, I enjoy it. I needed that. I needed it. It was perfect to like refresh me, get me ready for his stand up. The only thing I really like that room though, the Comedy Works. The only thing is their seating is like, they pack you in there. Like I would never order food there. Like it's like just ordering drinks is the bare minimum space for drinks, but you can't like you get like a shoebox lid size table between you and the person sitting next to you for food and drinks, but you can't set shit on there. It's like an armrest. It's like a metal armrest. So it's really packed in there. I enjoy the American Comedy Club is probably one of my favorite, or American Comedy Company in San Diego. It's like a basement, similar to Comedy Works is a basement, but it's just the setup's a lot more comfortable. It's probably my favorite. And then the Comedy Store. But yeah, now with podcasts, I get exposed to all these different comedians, but also I get the insight on a lot of the inner workings of what it is to be a comic. So a lot of comics, you know, like to talk about the experience of going on the road, or the experience of shooting a special, the experience of doing these different things, and it's interesting. So some of the podcasts that I listen to that you might want to check out that have comics, Tiger Belly is awesome with Bobby Lee, really funny. Clearly the Joe Rogan Experience, Ari Shaffir Skeptic Tank, Bertcast, Your Mom's House, one of the funniest podcasts ever made, with Tom Segura and Christina Pazitsky. What else? Tony Hinchcliffe, Kill Tony, is a fun podcast if you're into sports. Which they don't always talk about sports, but Punch Drunk Sports with Ari Shaffir, Sam Tripoli, and Jason Tebow. Yeah. And All Things Comedy is basically a production company for comics, by comics, and they produce their own podcasts now, and they're going to start producing more stuff, like higher-end stuff, like TV shows or web series, and who knows what else. So that's super exciting. That's a company that I would love to work for in the future, All Things Comedy, or work with at some point. But yeah. So stand-up comedy now is like, I listen to specials all the time. I'm like constantly with Netflix. It's great. You get specials all over the place. So it's a really good time for comedy. I love it. As a comedy fan, I'm hugely appreciative that I'm living in a time where I have not only access to all these different comics through streaming services to see their specials, but also the opportunity to get the behind the scenes kind of stuff with their podcasts. So that's it, everybody. That's my discussion on comedy. I'm sorry if I missed names. I'm still trying to think of the guy that featured for Ari, and I can't do it. But thank you all for listening. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Ray Taylor. You can help support this show as well as everything else that I do at Patreon, patreon.com/inspired disorder. Donate $1 a month more if you want to get perks. So there's that option. And then inspireddisorder.com for links to subscribe to this show on YouTube or iTunes or all the other stuff and artwork. There's over 100 drawings. There's over 100 Photoshops in 2 different series. So go buy those if you want to help support as well. And that's it. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. Have a great weekend. Have a great week. Peace out.